they can shut you down. They can shut every doctor in New Zealand or dietitian or anyone in the medical community from saying anything publicly. That's what it is. Yeah, I think we're going through the toughest times that I've ever experienced in my life. And I'm 72 years old, so that takes me back a bit. But my parents went through the Second World War, and I'm sure your parents or your grandparents as well went through the Second World War, and they were very brave and they didn't quit. And I just think that this is our Third World War, what we're going through. And people perhaps don't understand what is at stake, but what is at stake is unbelievably worth fighting for.
Professor Noakes has published more than 750 scientific articles and books. He has been cited more than 16,000 times in scientific literature and is rated an A1 scientist by the National Research Foundation of South Africa. Well, it's such a privilege to be able to speak with you today, Tim. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel.
Well, it's my pleasure, Sam. Lovely to chat to you. I've watched a lot of your YouTubes and you're superb. You're just brilliant. So congratulations on what you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Well, do you know, my first encounter with your work was actually through the law of running, and and a little birdie tells me, and this may be wrong, but that you don't recommend that book anymore. Is that true?
No, it's just a diet story. It's so funny because I did a video, a short documentary with Donnell O'Neill, a great friend of mine, who we put on a high-fat diet. He came to Cape Town from Ireland, and we put him on the high-fat diet and followed him for 6 weeks, and he filmed what happened. And one day he brought the book to me and he said, Tim, I want you to tear out the pages that you no longer believe in. So there's this epic moment in the documentary where I tear out the pages of Law of Running. The reality is actually what's written there isn't wrong, but it's contextually wrong. So the studies are correct, but they were done in athletes eating high carbohydrate diets. And there was no story about the people who are eating high fat diets. So there was no balance. So it's actually not wrong, but it just gives the wrong focus. Yeah. So that was the problem there. But it's you'll be glad to know that I am rewriting the book. And I'm about to start.
That's
I'm
exciting.
about to start, and the first few chapters are the myths. I'm getting rid of the myths, and then I'll see what's left to leave in. I spoke to the publishers, who's great. They've been fantastically helpful to me. And I said, can't we just keep that book on a CD and stick it in the book and then write a whole new book? So they said, no, you have to rewrite it and just keep what's good, but it's all good. So I've got this problem that I've a lot of good stuff, but I don't know what to throw out. And so I'm just going to start writing the new stuff and then see what the old stuff I can keep.
Oh, that sounds good. Oh, I would love to read a later edition. That sounds wonderful.
No, it's going to be my last gasp, the last effort, because it will be in its. I first published in 1985, so it's coming up for the 40th year. You see, so it'll be the 40th year edition.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's probably safe to say that the amount of work that you've done through your career is just prolific. I'm gobsmacked by how much you've managed to jam in. And you've written many books, and you've obviously founded the Noakes Foundation, which is also up to some fantastic work, and particularly in advancing the benefits of the high fat, low carb diet. And one of your more recent books I was particularly interested in was The Law of Nutrition. I wondered if you'd be able to explain, how did you come about to this change in the way you saw nutrition and eating? How did that come about for you, but coming from a conventional training?
I think you need to understand that I come from a family with diabetes, and my dad died of diabetes and uncle died of diabetes. And I've got the genes for diabetes very strongly. When I go back and look at data on myself, I was profoundly insulin resistant already in my 20s when I was very lean, running marathons, training heavily. I had a fasting insulin, which was 5 times normal on a high carbohydrate diet. And I was extremely lean. I had a body mass index of probably 21 or so.
Yeah.
So it was nothing to do with obesity. This was in the genes. And ultimately I was going to get type 2 diabetes, but of course I didn't recognize it. My dad died, and it was very frustrating because I couldn't help him. I didn't understand the disease. Well, by fortune, my good fortune was one day I had a terrible run. I came home, and on the email, I opened my email, and there was an advert for a book, and it said, lose 6 pounds in 6 weeks without hunger. And it was the new Atkins for the new you, written by Eric Westman. And I knew Eric had done some really good research, and Jeff Volek and Steve Phinney. I knew about them because we had done high-fat diets because of Steve Phinney. In 1984, he'd published the first paper on a high-fat diet and exercise performance. It was only a small study of 5 people. And we were the first people in the world, as I can remember, who then took that up and did some high-fat studies. And you won't believe it, they all worked. So the people who went on the high-fat diet, and I think it was all suggestion. I think, how if you're a scientist and you believe in something, you'll convince the person being examined. And I think that's all we did, because we got these incredible results and we were never able to repeat them. so there was something going on. So anyway, so then I got so angry. I said, how can Steve Phinney sell himself to Atkins? So I went and picked up the book, and literally in 2 hours, I said, oh my gosh, I got it all wrong. Wow. And I said, that's it, no more carbs. And I changed that moment. And for lunch, I went off carbs and onto a high-fat, high-protein diet, which was not difficult for me because that's what my mother raised me on. My mother was from Liverpool, and she was from the other side of the family that didn't have diabetes. And they were all heavy meat eaters. And her father, in fact, was an exporter of meat from out of Liverpool to across to America through on the boats that used to go between Liverpool and New York. Yeah. And she believed in meat, absolutely. And so I remember her saying that one of the beauties of Africa is you could get lots of good meat. I remember her telling me that.
Yeah, well, it's the breadbasket of the world, isn't it? It's supposed to be.
Yeah, so I went on the diet, and now I can tell you the narcissism, which is just beautiful, you see. So remember it said 6 weeks, 6 pounds. Wow. So I knew I had to go to Sweden and speak to the expert ultramarathon runners, you see. And I thought, well, if I can lose 6 pounds in 6 weeks, I'm going to look a little bit better, Yeah. So it turned out I lost, what was it, 11 kilos in 10 weeks.
Whoa, that's huge.
And when I arrived there, I was much leaner. I still wasn't as lean as I wanted to be. And my running just took off. It was just astonishing. And I went back 20 years. So that convinced me that this was the right thing for me. And it's only got better with time. I eventually reversed my type 2 diabetes. Then I eventually discovered I had type 2 diabetes. Then I reversed it on the diet. Wow. And I've been promoting the diet ever since. Of course, as you are going to probably mention, that took me into conflict with my profession. And they wanted to throw me under the bus, which they did. They threw me under the bus for telling the truth. And well, we can continue on that story.
Yeah, no, you're literally leading into my next question, because I mean, I wanted to hear about what happened to you, because I know that you've run into a lot of conflict, I guess, like with the big nutrition, big pharma comparative. But yeah, please, can you talk about what happened to you?
So what happened was that I was funded by the medical insurance company in South Africa and also by our research foundation. As soon as I came out with the diet, we lost all that funding. And part of the problem was that I was the poster boy for this company, which was selling medical insurance. And I was the poster boy for the diet. And their diet, of course, was low fat, high carbs. And I mean, you can see videos of me saying, you must eat this, that, and the other. And never really believing it, never really believing it, because it didn't work for me. And so then, of course, I discovered that I was wrong. And then I wrote something in one of their magazines that they send to all their clients. And I think it was something about ending the grains, something like that, no more grains or something like that. And that caused me to lose all funding from them. And then shortly thereafter, the Medical Research Council in South Africa, which had funded me for 25 years, we were one of the 2 leading units in the country. They suddenly stopped funding. And then my university threw me under the bus. And they did that by writing a letter from 4 senior professors to the local newspaper, accusing me of being unethical in my research and promoting a diet that was harmful to all South Africans. And it was going to cause huge damage. So that was really the beginning. And that letter was used as proof that my university and all the universities in South Africa did not agree with me. And so I was put before the Health Professions Council of South Africa because a complaint was sent to them by a dietitian who was completely conflicted because she was linked to all sorts of big food companies. What happens then, so when you are reported to the Health Professions Council, you have to write the response to them, which I did, and then they are meant to call you together with the committee. They never did that. They said they originally they couldn't charge me because they didn't know what to charge me with.
Yeah.
They had a meeting. They said, we don't know what to charge him with. They then went and garnished other information. They didn't warn me about this. They went and garnished that information, and then they charged me, which was completely against the Constitution of South Africa. They disagreed with my constitutional rights. So I was charged, and then fortunately, two of the best lawyers in South Africa, one of them who I'm just very friendly with, we're brothers now, and I'd done a case with him before, and he said, Tim, I'll do it for you for nothing. And he gave me literally millions of rands worth of service for nothing. Wow. And then one of the senior counselors in South Africa, Mike van der Nest, phoned me one day and he said, Tim, they're acting against your constitutional rights. You have the freedom of speech. You have the freedom to say what you said. And he said, I will defend you. And those two, there was no one on their side that they could come up with who came even within a millimeter. They were just pathetic, the prosecution. But anyway, what Mike said to me, he said, Tim, I just want evidence. All I want is your evidence. You just give it. And so we gave the evidence for 12 days and Nina Teichold came out from America, Zoe Holcomb came out from Wales, and Corin Zinn, your own Corin Zinn, came out from New Zealand. Wow. And those three just destroyed. The funniest moment for me was Rocky Ramdas, who was an activist during the apartheid era, and he led the activism on one particular campus. And that's why I got the name Rocky. But I mean, we had such a ball. We just loved it. We were together for the 9 days. I was on trial for 9 days and giving evidence with him and being cross-examined and so on. And we just had an absolute ball all the time. But the funniest thing was, in preparation, he said, okay, Tim, you're on the witness stand. I'm going to cross-examine you. So now I'm the expert, and Rocky is obviously, he's a medical doctor as well, which is what's so fantastic. And he started questioning me on his medical knowledge, and I got so tongue-tied. He said, Tim, see, you got to understand, this is what law is about. And I asked him, what's the difference between law and medicine? He said, law is what is, medicine is what might be. And it's a lovely statement.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love that.
And so anyway, so we had a great time. And the great moment was their chief, the expert witness for the prosecution came forward. Now, she's the lady who wrote the South African dietary guidelines for feeding. And I was charged with contravening those guidelines, telling a mother she should wean her baby onto a high-fat diet, which actually is the dietary guidelines. But this expert didn't even understand it. Anyway, so she got up on the stage and she gave her testimony for the prosecution, and now we get to tackle her. So Rocky gets up and he says, so tell me, Professor, what was your undergraduate training in? Home economics. Oh, home economics. So what was your PhD in? No, my PhD was in physiology. I see. So you have no training in nutrition? No training in nutrition. Have you ever done any research on the low-carb, high-fat diet? No, I've never done any research on the low-carb, high-fat diet. Have you ever prescribed a low-fat, high-carb diet? No. And then she also claimed that she was going to give evidence on the ethics side of what I'd done, you see. So then he said, well, what training do you have in ethics? No, I don't have any training in ethics. So I said, well, what are you doing here then? And there's a certain word in South Africa, which I won't give it to you, but it just means if you want to dismiss someone, you use this word. Yeah. It's not particularly rude, but it's just very dismissive. And the only word she said to me in the 4 years of the trial was that word. One word in the whole time. Yeah.
What I love
and then sadly she died of cancer, which she promotes a high grain, low fat diet, lots of cereals, lots of insulin spiking cereals, and she dies of cancer, and so does her husband. And no one asks, was their diet linked to what happened to them?
What I love about you, Tim, is how you're so I love how you just laugh at it. That's kind of how I am too. All these things that have happened to you, and yet you're so positive, regardless of everything that's happened. I suppose, I mean, I'm really interested in what happened to you, obviously, because something's happening very almost. I mean, I'm not as famous as you, but very similar to me, in that the New Zealand Medical Council were they're saying that I'm practicing medicine by making YouTube videos. And when I let my practicing certificate go, then they're now saying that I'm practicing without a license, and they're trying to, it is comical.
It is.
They're trying to take me, and it's like you, I was sort of the poster child for them, for the TV for a health show, and now everything. And I don't know if that happened to you very quickly, but for me it happened within weeks, where all these things happened very, very quickly, and smear articles. I mean, do you have any advice for medical practitioners who are facing backlash for going against sort of this medical dogma?
I think it's a constitutional issue, your freedom of speech. And the reason I say that is because what they wanted to do to me was to shut down any doctor in South Africa speaking publicly on any topic that they might decide was controversial, or they wanted to shut you down. So they said they wanted to prove that I was in a doctor-patient relationship with the lady whom I'd given some information to. I didn't give her advice, because I was talking to, she asked a we question. She said, we, babies and moms. So what I was doing, I wasn't giving advice, I was giving information. And the key to the whole trial eventually hung in, because she said, I've got all the information I need. She didn't say I've got all the medical advice I need. She said, I've got all the information I need. And I find it very confusing. So what if they had been able to say I was in a doctor-patient relationship in answering a we question? That meant that no one in South Africa, no doctor, could ever get up in public and answer any question, whether it was an I question or it's a we question. For example, must I stretch before I run a marathon? I can't answer that because I'm giving medical advice. That's what they could have chosen to do that. And that's what they're doing to you. It's exactly the same. If they can shut you down, they can shut every doctor in New Zealand or dietitian or anyone in the medical community from saying anything publicly. That's what it is. And I know what's happening with the COVID in New Zealand, and it's just at the extreme of that. You have to fight it, I think, on the constitutional basis that you have freedom of speech. Doesn't matter whether you're a doctor or not, you have freedom of speech. No, I totally, and that's what we are doing. Had been at the beginning, and I was shocked when it first sort of happened to me, because I thought, how can this be? I didn't even, you don't see it coming. And the other thing I sort of realized is that there are certain landmines in health that you can't, the unwritten rules that you can't talk about. You can't talk about seemingly COVID-19, cancer, nutrition. There are these, and when you inadvertently step on one of these landmines, boom. It's, the censorship seems to have ramped up heavily now with COVID-19 and what you're allowed to talk about. And if you have a different opinion to a scientific body or like a government entity, I mean, the level of smearing seems to have just increased exponentially. I mean, have you noticed that in your career? Like, it seems in the last few years it's just gone berserk, but what do you think about it? Oh, absolutely it has. It's really interesting, because when I was talking about running and sports science, I was, as you said, the poster boy for, and I kept every single cutting that was ever written about me in the media. And right up till I changed in 2010, that was uniformly positive, extremely positive. I couldn't say anything that would make people angry. It was just, everyone loved it. And then suddenly that all changed. And then I started picking up the slack.
So have you been to New Zealand before?
Twice, yes. I went to Queensland and gave a lecture, and I must tell you a lovely story. So it was the Rugby World Cup. I forget which year it was. And so I got this lovely New Zealand jersey, which I still have, which of course we're always fighting South Africa and New Zealand. So anyway, they said, on one condition, we'll give you this jersey. You have to wear it on the plane back to Sydney. So I flew back to Sydney, and then there was behind me was this big guy. And he said, how can you, it was an Australian, he said, how can you wear that? I said, well, I'd never wear that dreadful yellow thing that you people wear. You see, that's the yellow rugby jersey of the New Australians. And it turned out he was the head of the Olympic Committee for Australia. So he wasn't very happy. And I've been to New Zealand, yes. And we went down to Queensland and we went up the east coast, is it the west coast of the South Island, and stayed for a few days. I had a fantastic trip. And one of my great friends is in Wellington, and I've got lots of friends in Auckland as well. I mean, the whole of South Africa lives in New Zealand, as you know.
I know, they do actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, this is a little bit of a cheeky question because I'm just interested. I've got a video coming up on this topic. What's your definition of misinformation?
It's what the medical profession is giving out now. In the pharmaceutical industry, that's what it's happening. Yeah, it's it's lies upon lies upon lies upon lies, and that's the misinformation. What's my definition? Well, it is. It's what we're hearing at the moment.
Yeah,
which is ironic because I get tackled every day for tweeting misinformation, but I know it's not misinformation. I know that by and large it's solidly true.
Is there a particular book that you've written that you felt has been your best work?
Yeah, I think Law of Running is ranked the 9th best book on running, so that's obviously quite an achievement, quite a good book.
It's amazing.
And that was.
Don't be humble.
That took about 20 years to get right. But the Law of Nutrition, it's very detailed, but it definitely does describe what happened to me and why I chose to do what I did and the evidence we presented. In the trial, we presented 7,000 pages of scientific evidence, to which the prosecution responded with one paper of 8 pages or so. That was it. That was their evidence. And the paper was fraudulent. In our opinion, it's fraudulent. And we describe why that is so. But that was it's a hard read, but it's correct. And it tells you exactly what happened to me, how I changed my mind, what happened to me, how the universities attacked me, how individuals and companies attacked me. Then we get into the trial, and then I described my understanding of nutrition, where the nutrition problems arise. Then more recently, we've written this book, The Eat Right Revolution.
Yes, I've seen, tell me that.
And that's with Marika Sporos, and this is a much condensed version. And if you wanted to get our opinions and understand a little bit about insulin resistance and why it's the real killer, I tried to put a lot into this. And this is my favorite diagram this is what insulin resistance does to your body. So when you go to the doctor and they say you must have a statin, so that's insulin resistance and what it does. And you think that you can take one pill, a statin, and that's going to reverse that.
Fix it.
Please.
Yeah.
There's only one thing where you can fix that, and is to cut your carbs and cut your processed foods, ultra processed foods. So that's a good book. But then the book I'm really proud of, I don't have a copy here, is Waterlogged. And that's the 30-year argument I had with the Pepsi Cola, because they produce a product called Gatorade.
Yeah.
And I was originally researching carbohydrates and exercise, and we developed a drink in South Africa called Energate for use by athletes, and I promoted that all my career until I suddenly realized there was a problem. And the problem was that these drinks were getting over-promoted, and athletes were getting told to drink as much as tolerable during marathon races. And I predicted in the 1990s that the first person to die from this condition I described, which we'll come to, will be a female marathon runner in the United States. And in 1993, it happened. So my prediction was absolutely correct. And why would it be a female runner? Because they take a bit longer to run marathons. They take 5 or 6 hours, and they listen to instructions. And if you tell them to drink to beyond thirst as much as possible, as much as tolerable, they will be very likely to overdrink, and then they're smaller, so that they're more likely at risk. So what happens is that they retain the water because they've got they over-secrete antidiuretic hormone, they retain the water, they don't realize that they're not urinating, they drink, and then they dilute the sodium, as you know, and then that causes water to flood into the brain, and they lose consciousness. And then they come into the medical tent, and the doctor says, oh, you see another dehydrated runner. What do they treat with? They get intravenous fluids, and that kills the patient. And we recognized that already in 1985 and warned the world, don't do it. And we definitely prevented a major problem. And I must say that there was a New Zealand researcher that I did with, Ben Speedy, and he was from Christchurch.
Oh, good
and
name.
He did some fabulous studies. He's from your town. So Ben and I did some fabulous studies in the 1990s. And what he did was he was the first guy to weigh more than 300 runners or swimmers at the start of a triathlon.
Yeah.
So I didn't think that was possible, but he showed us how it was possible. And so he did a couple of studies in New Zealand, and we did a couple of studies in South Africa where we weighed everyone before and at the end, and then we could see who'd put on weight. Yeah. And at that time, the teaching was you always lose weight when you run marathons or you do triathlons, and it wasn't true.
Yeah.
We found plenty who gained weight. Yeah. And those who gained weight were at great risk of developing this condition of hyponatremia. So waterlog, so I'll tell you about waterlog. So because it fits into the other stories.
Yeah, no, please.
So it was a 30-year story, and I wrote the 30 years into one manuscript. It was a huge manuscript. And the night I sent it off to America to be seen was the next morning I woke up and had that run, the terrible run, and then changed my diet that very day. And when the book arrived with the editors, they said, no, Tim, this is not how you write a book. This is not, because I had made claims there which would have sent it all in, we would all gone to jail. But anyway, that was so they said, no, we're not going to do this. But then we got the most fabulous editor, and she picked out the 60% that was the golden stuff. And it's just a fabulous book, and it's timeless. It's absolutely timeless because it goes back into history, and it captures what the science is.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
So you ask what's misinformation? Well, that's the book that hasn't got misinformation. That defines the story. And if you hear other stuff about what you should be drinking, that's often the misinformation.
Yeah. And I sense this theme from you, Tim, I like the same, is that you like to peel things right back to the absolute fundamentals. Is that something you've come to realize over your career? Or
okay, so now I'll tell you another story. So when I went into study medicine, a lot of people who go into science, because we see a discrepancy between the problems that patients have and the fact that we actually don't know what's really going on.
Yeah.
And so and you have to act without real knowledge. And then you go and read the literature, and there's this unbelievable amount of knowledge. And you will ask, well, why can't all that knowledge be applied to the patient? And I understand why it can't be. But there's this huge discrepancy between what people know from laboratory research and what we can apply in clinical practice. And a lot of people, like myself, realize, actually, I'm better in the science side than in the patient care side. And one of them was Hans Krebs. And Hans Krebs had that experience, and he went and studied and then won a Nobel Prize and went to Oxford. And the two South Africans who he recruited were the people who taught me. And what I noticed about them at the end of their careers was that they had eidetic memories, both of them. They had this, they could see everything and they immediately knew it. They had photographic memories.
Yeah.
And so it was easy for them. And they were the two best lecturers I've ever heard, because it was all there. They didn't have to search for it and remember it. It just stayed there, and they could give it, but they weren't creative. That was the interesting thing. They weren't creative. Now, I have a good memory, but I'm not eidetic. And I can't remember all the stuff like that. I have to logically work out, how does this equal that equals that equals that?
Yeah, definitely.
So I have to get everything apart, go right back, and start from the bottom up. And so that's what I did. Yeah. That's why I go and read, and you can't see it because I've put most of my books in a museum now, but I've got the books going way back. Actually behind me over here, and I'm going to just walk over to it.
Yeah.
These are some of the books here, which I found, and those were for waterlog, because they're the history of fluid balance during exercise and in animals and so on.
Yeah.
But you can see I bought them on Google or whatever, and they're all old copies. But that's what I do, and I can't not do it for some reason.
When you have these sort of epiphanies of going, I had this all wrong, like you say with diabetes, that I had it all backwards. And I've worked in diabetic clinical trial research for years, and nobody talks about insulin resistance, and it's almost this backwards thing. When you see it, you think, how have I been so stupid for so long and not realized?
No, it's frightening. It's frightening how people can't see it.
You know, with some of the hard times that you've been through, obviously with when they came after you, did you find it easier over time? Like, has it been easier over as your career's gone, like that you don't get so affected by it? Or no,
I mean, I definitely had post-traumatic stress disorder, no question. And my wife will tell you that I was pretty depressed, although I didn't show it because I can mask it. But I could mask it some of the time, but not all the time. When I was at home, I couldn't mask it. So she saw it. But when I was in public and on the trial, you couldn't notice it. I was vibrant because I knew I had to be.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was focused because I knew what we had to do. So I didn't have to worry about this other stuff. No, it was absolutely traumatic. And, my son noticed it in me, and he decided to do his postdoc research on exactly what had happened to me and how I'd been targeted. And we've written the first paper together on it, and we published it. And it was all that happened to me, how the social media was used by groups. And what he's doing now is tracking how the groups communicated. Because what happened, a key moment in my career was when the university professors, the four most senior university professors, wrote this letter to the Cape Times, the local newspaper, saying that I had been thrown out of the university. And then what social media did, what the group of Twitter experts and Instagram and so on from the university, the culture, those people, they weren't all university employed, but they were all connected. They said that the university had made that decision. It wasn't. It was four people that made that decision. So when he went back and looked at the messaging that was getting out on social media, it's Tim Noakes has been thrown out because he's wrong and he's doing unethical research, had been thrown out by the university. And so that stimulated him. But the point was, he realized that I was a changed person during the 4 years of the trial. I was first declared innocent in 2017. And then immediately they appealed it. And I was depressed for 2 days. It was just awful. And I got this terrible, terrible feeling. And then eventually we won that case. And then there would be moments when it would come back to me. So I went and gave a talk to medical colleagues. And I said, you guys didn't stand up for me.
Yeah.
You didn't stand up for me. And I felt dreadful for the next day. And it was this dreadful depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. But I'm through with it now. I mean, you can discuss it and you can see it doesn't affect me anymore.
Yeah.
But it took literally 2 or 3 years to get there. And, without the support of the support of my legal team, Nina and Zoe and Karen and my wife and Marika Sporos, who helped write the books. And if we hadn't written the books as well, The Law of Nutrition, if we hadn't written that book, it would have been more difficult. But that was the beauty, because the people who had been offensive and who'd been uncivil to it's recorded for history. They are known. Yeah. They can't get away with it.
I know.
I think that you suppress it in the subconscious, and then it comes up whenever something happens and it triggers you. That's what happens. But then eventually you get past that. Yeah, I had fantastic support. There was no question about that. And, I always knew we were going to win. I mean, because I knew we had the evidence.
Yeah.
And I knew that as long as there were just 2 or 3 honest people on the committee, I was going to win. And we knew there were 2 honest people. And so we just had to convince one other person of the 3, and then we were okay. So I never doubted that I was correct and that I would win. And we presented all the evidence, and in the end, it worked out. Yeah. But my wife does tell me, it could have gone the other way if the committee had been dishonest. So yeah, that's how it is.
That's exactly how what I think with what's happening to me is I exactly like you. I know I'm right. and
Yeah.
and it's just
Exactly.
a matter of you get an honest court to hear it, but I guess
we would have gone to the High Court. If I'd lost, we would have gone to the High Court.
Yeah.
And my senior counsel said, listen, they would throw it out within 20 minutes. They'd throw this case out. They'd say there was no reason for doing what they did. Yeah.
Did you?
There's hope for you for that if you have to go to a different court. Yeah.
I'm going to the High Court I'm taking the medical council to the High Court over what's happening because but like you, I'm very lucky with my counsel. Did you find that you had supporters that you didn't expect?
Oh yeah. So I read this somewhere that Jeffrey Archer, the writer who's got a bad track record, but we won't worry about that.
Yeah.
He said that when you're under pressure like this, the people come towards you, and those are the real people you must embrace. The rest disappear.
Yeah.
So a whole bunch of people disappeared, and I don't speak to them anymore. And that's, they were part of my past, part of my scientific past. I gave them careers, and they turned on me, or they wouldn't support me, so they're gone. But the people who come to you, those are the people you embrace. And that's what happens. And those are the real stars, the real people that you bind them to you. And I had enough of those. And you find that they are absolutely the best quality people that you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
And I refer to my legal team, but I refer also to Nina Teicholz, who wrote the book, The Big Fat Surprise. She is absolutely out of the top drawer. And so is Zoe Harcom, and so is Karen Zinn. Those are three people. If Karen was in trouble, I would fly to New Zealand tomorrow. She said, Tim, I'm in trouble. I need your help. I would be on the next plane.
Yeah.
That's, and the same with Zoe, and the same with Nina Teicholz. That's what they are. Those are the people that you bind and you support.
Yeah. No, I found that myself. And some of the heartbreaking things, I don't know if that happened to you, but people that you've known for years, and like I had a colleague that I'd worked with for 12 years, and she went absolutely berserk at me one day, and I didn't see it coming, and it really upset me for like weeks. That I thought, why would she do this? And then I like the saying of you have to forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing, and it's really upsetting.
And anyone who comes and questions what they're thinking, they are the other side, and they're expelled. So that's why there's this animosity and anger. At least I know it as it relates to COVID, but diabetes, I would guess it's exactly the same. I've been doing this all my life. I've been teaching this. Don't come and tell me I'm wrong. I can't accept that. I think that might be the reason.
But you have, I love that about you, Tim, where you have such a humbleness, where you're prepared to admit that you've been wrong about ideas, and you've changed. And I feel the same, that it's a honesty of going, actually, I made a mistake there, but now I feel like this is the right thing. It's a lovely.
But I think it's because we care about people. That's the difference. And all the people who come against you are psychopathic. I mean, I just maybe they're not all out and out psychopaths, but they have no empathy, and they just. So a guy tweeted this morning, Noakes, you complained that the people mobbed you, academic mobbing, and actually all we were doing was pointing out that your science is bad. Not at all. They went for me with the most vicious way, and if they could have caused me to commit suicide, they would have been very, very happy. Yeah, that's the final outcome of academic mobbing, which is what I went through and what you've gone through, is suicide. Yeah. And that's what they want to happen. And you can't afford to do it, because then you're giving in to them.
No. I have to say, I don't want to compare. I mean, it's very similar what I've been through, but at the same time, I don't know if it was the same level as what happened to you. But I feel now I've got to this really strange point where I just laugh. When things happen, I'm just like laughing. It doesn't affect me, because I remember when I'd get even bad comments on YouTube videos, and I'd say to my husband, why were they saying this? I don't understand it. And then now I'm just, there can be smear articles, and I'm like, oh yeah. It really doesn't bother me.
That's right. That's right. It does, but it doesn't. I know what you mean. No one wants to be criticized, but it doesn't get that visceral, that raw visceral response that you speak about.
Is there I just wanted to say I think it's amazing what you've done in terms of with the Noakes Foundation, your career. I sincerely admire you and everything that you've achieved. It's amazing. And my question was there anything else that you wanted to say, or any advice or wisdom information that you think would be helpful?
I think we're going through the toughest times that I've ever experienced in my life. And I'm 72 years old, so that takes me back a bit. But, my parents went through the Second World War, and I'm sure your parents or your grandparents as well went through the Second World War. And they were very brave, and they didn't quit. And I just think that this is our Third World War, what we're going through. And people perhaps don't understand what is at stake, but what is at stake is unbelievably worth fighting for.
Yeah.
And if we give away our freedoms, we're in real, real trouble. So one could easily look forward and say, well, actually, we've lost it, and we're going to all become fascist states, communist states, socialist states, and we will have no more freedoms, and we won't be talking like this in future because you won't be able to talk openly. But I don't see it. I think that there's a grand awakening that is happening. And I've got some insights into what's happening in the legal battles behind the scenes. And we just need one or two really big cases to break. And that will then expose all the problems that we face with our profession. They'll show that the profession is completely controlled by the pharmaceutical industry and by big food. And that it's got nothing to do with education and patient care anymore.
Yes.
That the universities are utterly, completely controlled by industries who manipulate it just to become the propaganda arm. And the profession has become the propaganda arm for the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm hopeful that COVID will expose all of this and that we can move forward. And I'm sure you feel the same way, that I see most of medicine could be handled by people who would just advise you on your nutrition. That's all you need.
Yes. Hallelujah. Yes, 100%. I agree with you. So
the public has to realize that sooner or later. Every day I get people saying, I went to the doctor. My daughter went to the doctor and she said, the guy's hopeless. He just said exactly the same. And I had to tell him what I thought. It was absolutely hopeless. And I had to pay whatever amount of money. And I think the public will slowly realize that. And if I had my wish, it would be that there would be universities that teach nutritional management of chronic disease or prevention of chronic disease. And that of course, you need medicine, you need surgery, you need obstetrics, you need pediatrics, and sure. Yeah. But for chronic disease, you don't need what they're giving us. That can be handled by nutritional coaches. That's all you do. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to educate in the Noakes Nutrition Network, is we're training people to become nutrition coaches. And it's all low carb plus exercise. And the results are spectacular, as you know.
Yeah.
So it looks terrible if you take the worst picture, but I just think I'm always positive, and I just think that something's going to crack, and it's going to crack in the next year or two, and then we're going to see new freedoms and new vistas that we couldn't have believed possible.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's such a revelation coming, and where can people who want to learn more is the best place for them to go to the Noakes Foundation website?
Yeah, I think go to our website, the Noakes Foundation or the Nutrition Network. That's probably the best.
Oh, okay.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Prof Tim Noakes, and it's a laugh a minute there. And you can see people telling me I'm a complete quack and me fighting back.
I hope you give them hell. That's great. Oh.
Yeah, well, they always complain. They said all Noakes' acolytes come and attack me when I try and attack him. Then they all get the person who's attacking me gets attacked by my acolytes. So they say it's a cult. You see, this is all a cult. It's not science, it's a cult.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time, Tim.
No, it's been a huge privilege, and I'm wishing you well and praying for you. And Rocky would tell me that you need to go and study the Hindu Ganesha. Ganesha is the deity who takes away your problems. So we had every day at the trial, we would go through what's Ganesha going to help us today, and which problems is the deity going to take away. So I just think about that. Go and read about Ganesha, the Hindu deity who takes away your problems.
Oh, cool. I will. Okay. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And again, thank you. It's been a fabulous hour.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the best. And I'll be praying for you and thinking about you very fervently until your case is resolved. And you will win, and you will change the world. Just as I know you've got faith, just keep the faith.
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Tim. To help sustain my channel in this time of censorship, please support my work on Subscribestar. Link is in the description. So that we don't lose touch, please find me at drsambailey.com and sign up for my free newsletter.